This is another Read Me Something reward for Reich E. Spore's Patreon. We are reading from my space opera, Demons of the Past, Revelation, Chapter 23, Varan.
Evaluation you ready for?
Dr. Sue Vikalasa said. That was, in a way, a relief. The past few days had been filled with hidden tension mostly on my part, but I sensed there was some for the Earthan exile as well. Given the conversation I'd partly overheard, I wasn't surprised. Failure to produce the desired results and an inclination to arguing was something the monster called Shagrath probably didn't tolerate well. And even if he had to keep playing a human role, there wasn't much doubt that Sue Vikalasa's career and possibly life were entirely in Shagrath's hands. Still, since I didn't know what effects these tests might have, I couldn't help but look nervously at the evaluation tank. It was a sort of ovoid shell which opened on each narrow end to reveal a seat surrounded by probes and sensors and other less identifiable contact elements. What exactly are we going to evaluate today?
Stability, control, focus, baseline, telepathic today evaluated,
The scaly doctor replied. Some day I might figure out the exact rules by which he selected the words, but I suspected I'd never quite get it perfect. Waving in a grand gesture at the evaluation tank, Dr. Sue Vikalasa went on to explain the tank was designed to create total isolation of the target mind and the evaluating mind, permitting measurement of the specific actions taken by the target and their resulting effects on the evaluator and the target. It also protected the evaluator from attempted attacks or other possible hostile actions based on parameters set by the evaluator. There was also a simple external monitor with an automated trigger in case of certain events. For example, Dr. Sue Vikalasa said, in a tone that indicated that it was possibly a warning as well as a description, it was relatively easy to detect the pattern of an attempt to control the evaluator, and this would trigger a full area size screen, an alarm, and possibly worse, depending on the exact event. I see. So if the treatment had rendered me insane and I tried to grab hold of your mind to make sure you wouldn't give me away, I'd give myself away.
Understand situation. Good to see you, do you? He affirmed. We begin, shall.
I sat down in the target seat, seeing Dr. Sue Vikalasa disappear into the other end of the ovoid. Shagrath had already left. While the tank's shielding should prevent interference, both the prime monitor and the scientist wanted to take as few risks as possible. The sensor array descended gently, molding itself to my body, and everything went dark. Then Dr. Sue Vikalasa spoke in my ear, obviously through a microphone arrangement, and instructed me to slowly open my barriers and check to see if I could hear anything but his thoughts. Cautiously, I did as he said. Silence. I could sense Sue Vikalasa's presence, but he had his own mind shield up. Apparently he could at least manage that much psionic ability, and so his existence introduced only an incomprehensible whisper into what was otherwise dead mental silence. None of the uncountable voices that I would hear when I dropped my defenses. Nothing. I barely hear your own mind's presence. You have a shield?
A cripple I may be, but not dead. Of course I have a shield.
If I hadn't been restrained by about 6 tons of machinery around me, I probably would have jumped a meter in the air. The voice had spoken in my head, sounding in tone quite like Dr. Sue Vikalasa, but with perfect enunciation, and grammar for that matter.
Of course, you are hearing my thoughts. Thoughts, concepts, interconnected structures of idea, action, fact.
There was an undercurrent of slight amusement.
As you receive these directly, they are interpreted by your mind in whatever way makes most sense to you.
You heard me?
That is the purpose of this procedure, is it not? To test your abilities and to evaluate your reactions.
An impression of a deliberate smile.
Being more experienced than you, I can also sense many minor impressions that you would not. For instance, your thought form of myself encapsulates everything from my appearance to my name, a name which you find unwieldy.
Well, I wouldn't have put it, I answered while realizing the potential danger if he could read stuff from me that I didn't know I was sending.
Obviously, your concept of courtesy in this case is reasonable, though many of your people's behaviors are possibly counter to logic. I take no offense. Indeed, select a shorter version of my name for spoken conversation if you wish. I will then be less formal in my address of you.
All right. Let me think about that for a minute. You can hear stuff I'm not sending to you?
Not exactly. Not if I refrain from probing. It is more that I can extract more information than you think from what you show me. Thoughts leave impressions on thoughts. Few thoughts are simple and direct. They are usually combined with many others. You can figure out direct components in large thought concepts, but smaller pieces and components of the large ideas you send must, of necessity, come through.
I sealed myself back inside my mind shield. I needed to think for a minute. The Earthon would be watching me more than anyone else, even Shagrath. Shagrath had at least told some clear truths, and one of those was that he had 100 other responsibilities and demands on his time, no matter what his ultimate purpose actually was. Su-Vikalasa, on the other hand, had no other purpose outside of this project. He could be the single greatest danger I'd have to deal with, or possibly the only ally I had. To give me a little more time, I opened for a second. Thinking about your name, it may be a bit short, but how about Vic from the middle portion of your name?
A bit short. Yes. Let me consider for a moment.
That gave me a few more seconds to consider the possibility that had suddenly presented itself. It was a sinking risky idea, but his reactions during that conversation I'd accidentally overheard might indicate that he had some scruples, and he was certainly being bullied. I heard him speak over the intercom, ignored it for a moment, realized it had been an acceptance of the name Vic which he'd tried to convey to me mentally, but since I was so tightly shielded, he couldn't. He was now asking that I open up. Just 1 minute, Vic, I said. I'm just getting myself set for the process. Mind talking was pretty strange to me. It suddenly dawned on me that I could possibly solve 2 problems with 1 answer. Find out if he could be an ally and verify for my own relative peace of mind that what I had experienced was, in fact, real and not a delusion. I took a deep breath and then sent out a mental question. I don't hear anything from external thoughts in here. Would that be true outside, or is this a one-way shield?
Both ways. No one-way shielding possible from simple mechanisms. Intelligent psionics can manage such things, but not devices.
So if I was standing outside, I couldn't hear your thoughts at all?
Correct. Not without either shutting the tank systems down or being a powerful enough psionic to smash through the shielding, something which would be very obvious both to those you are trying to read and to the mechanisms themselves. Now, shall we proceed?
Just a couple more questions, Vic. Is it possible that I would have been receptive to thoughts at certain points during the process, if I had been conscious? Or was this a situation where the capability would only emerge at the end? I felt slight puzzlement and a moment of thought.
Certainly possible, if you became conscious. The process is progressive and may at any point have triggered certain abilities.
All right, then. You did mention originally that I would probably be unconscious for most of the procedure. Is it possible that I could have become conscious for a short period in the middle of the experiment?
Why?
Just tell me. Vic hesitated. I felt a solidification of the shield, a feeling of great caution.
Yes, it is. To monitor the progress of much of the work, you must be very close to consciousness, in fact. because I must observe the behavior of your mind at many points.
From your readings, could you confirm or deny whether at any point during the process I did, indeed, gain consciousness, even for a few moments? The Orthon's shield went entirely opaque. I was alone in silence as complete as that of a tomb. I was suddenly aware of how entirely at his mercy I was. This machine could be a tomb for me if he wanted. What seemed like many minutes crawled by sluggishly. Then,
"You believe you did awaken at some point, and you want me to verify it. Is this correct?"
no point in performing a triple orbit when I could just come straight in. Yes, if there were no points during the time you performed the procedure that you might have been distracted, then I would presume you would already know.
Let us assume that, in fact, there is evidence you may have reached a state of consciousness at a point in the procedure.
Now, here was where things were really going to get interesting. If I were to say I overheard a conversation between you and the Prime Monitor during that time, would that also be possible? Very warily,
Possible.
if such a conversation had taken place, would it be possible to reasonably characterize that conversation as heated? His shield was so tight that literally nothing leaked through this time except the word thought.
If it was,
I would be curious as to whether your reluctance stemmed from purely scientific caution or whether you actually concerned yourself with my welfare. A long pause.
few are the things that are, in themselves, worthwhile. The essence of a thinking being is one of them. I would not destroy one lightly, especially one who has passed his testing as you have.
The word testing carried with it 1,000 overtones that I couldn't sort out. It seemed as fraught with import and emotion for Sue Vicolasa as the word fall would have been for me.
I have seen many destroyed of late.
Is it possible to show to someone something you perceived while receiving such thoughts as I would have been in this theoretical state?
Certainly.
Can such things be fabricated? That is, if I were to show you something I had perceived, could I be lying? I felt him think for a moment.
Yes, and also no, he answered finally. It is difficult, but possible, for a skilled telepath to project a sensation that they did not actually perceive. However, this requires great skill and practice. You have, for several reasons, considerable inherent talent and some instinctive skill, but it is quite impossible for you to be creating convincing fabrications now or at any time in the near future.
I hesitated. But I'd come this far, and now that I'd done enough of this telepathic interchange, I realized the chances that I could conceal a secret from Vic during long and careful examination and experimentation were very low anyway. Time to find out whether the pistol's charged or not. Then let me pass from theory to fact. I would like to have your opinion on something I perceived for a moment during the process. It has been very upsetting to me, and I need someone to verify what I think I saw. Now I felt a real flicker of worry that momentarily flared through the shield. But there was also curiosity, and perhaps something else lurking in the background.
Very well. Show me.
I carefully focused on that day and then released at full force the impressions I'd gotten in that single, splintered moment when Shaygrath's rage had screamed silently in my head. The Orthon's mind vanished immediately. I knew he must have disconnected, and when no corresponding release came for me, I began to panic. He must be calling Shaygrath. I tried to move, but there wasn't a millimeter's give in this comfortable multi-ton prison. Discipline was again my only comfort. I slowed my breathing, which had begun to go ragged as I felt the walls of this high-tech tomb closing in on me, and methodically stepped my way, this time, through each of the visions and centers. There wasn't anything else I could do. My newly created psi abilities were contained, and even though I could manage to activate them, I didn't know enough about the designs to know how I could safely inactivate or unlock the chamber. Then I felt the presence return.
I must apologize. My reaction to that impression was sufficient to cause the system to interpret it as my being under some form of attack and ejected me from the system. Fortunate for us both, I think, that I had inactivated the external alerts when our conversation proceeded to certain subjects. That was the mind of Shagrath?
Inexpressible relief washed through me. Yes, I know so little of these things, I thought perhaps that it was just a matter of seeing the base impulses within someone. An impression of a violent gesture of negation.
Such impulses are intertwined with what we are, true, but they are thus of necessity always accompanied by controlling impulses unless released. The fact that I did not die in that instant shows the latter is not the case.
Thoughts flying back and forth in his mind, too fast to follow.
I had suspected something was wrong based on certain facts with my studies on psionic abilities had shown me, but I had no actual evidence to show that it was Shagrath who was the problem. And this is, of course, only evidence to another psionic, which is utterly useless in your crippled empire.
I couldn't restrain my inherent reaction. What do you mean, crippled? We're the most powerful force in the galaxy, as far as I know.
In terms of technological power and resources, yes. But as Shagrath's stated purpose in the project already emphasizes, you are severely crippled against forces which use psi. And that is a much larger factor than you currently comprehend.
A waving of a mental hand.
Irrelevant now. We have already been fortunate that he did not sense the truth. There is no possibility that he will not be able to do so later in the project. Part of your training will involve sparring with another psionic, and obviously he is one of the foremost trainers in this area. So far, you have managed to avoid detection, partly due to great luck, and partly due to the templates and built-in reactions constructed in your mind during the process.
Templates? What do you mean? Vic explained that a normal psi grew up with the abilities, had them develop within him naturally, and in most species was raised with people who would help him learn how to control and direct them. This usually happened during the species' growth, during their equivalent of adolescence. As I was well past adolescence, though due to life extension therapy, not all that far past it, and had lacked both power and education in the field for my entire life, he had felt it appropriate to impress some equivalence upon my instinctive and biological reactions. This he did based both on his studies of human psi powers and on his extensive knowledge of Earthan abilities.
Some of those, he continued, may turn out to be the most useful of any you have gained. I was unsure earlier as to whether any of this would transfer successfully or not, but it appears that it will and does. I look forward to observing how much of it really functions. How well will an alien soul learn the way of the Earthan?
Scientific curiosity is rather damped in me at the moment, due to a concern that Shagrath seems certain to discover I know what he is. That triggered a ripple of something that could only be amusement. It suddenly occurred to me that there was a different feel to his mind than my own, yet it felt oddly familiar. Similar to that cool, alien presence that had appeared on occasion to force or guide my use of certain abilities. That's your templates, isn't it? An affirmation.
Correct. The ones most strongly derived from my people. You should be aware, however, that they would do you little good without your own inherent discipline. That was clearly what saved you from the Jorada attack.
Nice to know they were of use. But you say I won't be able to fool Shagrath, even with practice?
Grimness. We would truly be fools to think we could. Perhaps with a very large amount of practice. But we have no knowledge even of exactly what he is, the full extent of his powers, his actual age and experience, or what talents he may possess that we have never encountered before. Once the two of you meet mind to mind in some conflict, he will know what you are hiding, or at the least that you are hiding something, and he will then make sure he knows what that something is.
Torlin swords. Then it looks like my only hope is to escape. Really fast. The Earthon scientist seemed to laugh humorlessly.
Escape from the most secure facility in your empire, when all that Shagrath needs do is say something about you being a Psi in order to turn every word you say to dust. You have no vessel of your own, no allies save myself within thousands of light years, and, at a generous estimate, would at best have perhaps 10 to 12 hours between even the most clever attempted escape and the sounding of the alarm.
Suvikalasa was thinking furiously.
No, escape, at least of the simple sort, is not possible.
I was at a loss. I couldn't just submit meekly to the testing until such time as I had to face Shagrath and then get shot or brain blasted or however he decided to finish me off. But what Vic said made too much sense. At first I wanted to respond that I did have other allies, like Talon and his family. But I remembered that cold look in Talon's eyes when he mentioned what might happen if he had thought I was actually a Psi. Maybe I would be able to talk to Talon under the right circumstances, but the instinctive reaction from him or anyone else would be to shoot me or turn me in. Then what in the name of the fall can I do? There has to be something. There has to be. Sinking hells, I'm Mana, Navy. I swore to serve the Empire to my death. I can't just sit here and let that monster destroy it, or worse, somehow make me help him do it. For long minutes, Vic said nothing, either vocally or mind to mind, and I had nothing more to say. Then quietly, his mind voice spoke again.
There is a way.
There is? Tell me.
It is, of course, dangerous, and in a way far worse than dangerous for you.
I grimaced at that. How can it be more than dangerous?
It will demand a great deal from you that no other course of action would.
I could feel cold calculation combined with a sense of grim certainty. Whatever it was, Vic knew that it would be hard, but felt it was the only way. What will it demand? Suddenly I saw into the Earthon's mind, a flicker that he permitted me, to make me understand what he was. The testing, yes, a species that saw every aspect of life as a test for worthiness. A mind that was undoubtedly smarter than mine, larger, coldly calculating, yet filled with a resolve of purpose that made my dedication to the Empire look positively weak by comparison, though I could not quite make out the entirety of his purpose. What I could see, though, was that he was, at the moment, being deadly honest with me.
It demands that you place everything, your life, your mind, and your very soul, in my hands, willingly, without reservation, without fight, without any control whatsoever over what I will have to do. And even then, I have no absolute guarantees. I will still be the weak point, one who could at any time give you away.
I took a deep breath. Tell me what I have to do. He did, and as he explained, I realized with a sick shock of absolute conviction that he was completely right. This really was the only way I'd ever escape. But that I would never know if it succeeded until it was all over. I realized Vic had stopped explaining long minutes before. My mouth was dry and I felt my stomach trying to rebel against the very thought of what was being asked of me. Trust him? He was an exile who was working with people who might soon be making war in his own species. But I remembered Diore and Talon and even Zakla, and how those were just three faces of the countless trillions that made up the empire. Did I have the courage of my oath to face something that terrified me, that I'd already fought so hard to avoid? This is your test, a cold alien thought whispered through me, but not from Vic. This was from whatever part of his people he'd made a part of me. It was a part of me, too. I didn't know or understand their philosophy, but that essential question made sense. Sometimes it's a single choice that defines who and what you are, and that's the test. I swallowed, feeling painful dryness in my throat. All right. By the 7 towers, let that be the right decision. How long will this take?
Either it will be done by the end of the next few testing sessions, before you begin training with Shagrath, or it will never be done well enough. So, soon.
Then, with a sincere feeling of empathy which, more than anything else, convinced me that I had indeed chosen well.
And I thank you, Commander Sashavaran of the Imperial Marder, for placing this trust in me. By the choice of the past and the testing of the present and the ascension, I promise that I shall prove worthy of that trust. A trust that I, perhaps, might not have been able to give myself.
I felt odd adjustments starting in the screening field around me.
So, we begin.